Hi, everybody. It's Catie Harris of the Philly Wellness Center, and this is the Balance Body Menopause Summit. And on this today, we have Louise Digby. Louise Digby is a registered nutritional therapist who helps women get to their dream body, supercharge their energy, and overcome bloating, bowel problems, skin complaints, and more. She is the founder of the program Nourish Method to Lasting Fat Loss Program for women. Louise, thanks so much for doing this with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get stuck into it all and get a little bit sciencey as well.
Yeah, I love that.
So, we're going to be digging into why it gets trickier to lose weight after 40, what's happening in the body, and why it's not just to do with your hormones. There's hormones have become a bit of a scapegoat recently. You see a lot of stuff on social media where hormones are being blamed, and yes, they are a big factor, but we need to go a bit deeper than that and look at what's actually impacting the hormones. I'm going to give you a little bit of a science lesson so that you can understand how it works. And then once you understand that, it's much easier to understand what it is we need to do instead and why the typical approaches don't really work. All right, let's dive in then. Hopefully, you're going to get a lot from today. And one of the main things I'm going to show you is really the simplest way to get happy and confident in your skin without the rebound weight gain or the restrictive dieting now that you're in your 40s or 50s. Or if you are a different age or if you're in your 30s, still applies to you as well. I often talk about how we really need to unlearn what we've been told about weight loss so that we can take steps that are actually going to be helpful. So, we're going to do some of that unlearning today. And then by the end of this session, you're going to know how to go deeper than those typical surface level quick fixes that really do more harm than good so that we can really release this stubborn weight and keep it off in the long term as well. So, people that are watching, I know your time is valuable and I want you to feel reassured that you're in the right place. So, if you can relate to any of this, then you're very much in the right place. Are you tired of trying new plans only for them to be ineffective or unsustainable? Do you feel like the more you read and research, the less you really know about what on earth you're supposed to be eating? Are you sick of trying really hard and not seeing any progress at all ever since turning 40? Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the misinformation and the bombardment of conflicting ideas out there? And do you feel like you've tried everything and you just don't know which way to turn? If you can relate to that, then you're in the right place. And I want you to know that the reason why I understand this struggle so deeply is because my team and I have worked with hundreds of women over the years who have experienced this. And it's become my life's work to really help women to optimize their health and well being. And it's important for you to understand that it's not your fault. It's not your fault that the weight loss industry is an absolute minefield, especially when it comes to stubborn weight in midlife. What you've been taught about how to lose weight and generally be healthy is majorly flawed. It's majorly biased due to research that is driven by profits. And really, everything that we've ever been taught is based on how men's bodies work, not women's. And we're not just men's bodies with boobs. Our biology is really different. Okay. So the real problem is that the traditional way of eating less and exercising more, it doesn't work in the long term. And when you continue to restrict your calories over and over again, it makes the problem worse because your metabolism slows right down to compensate for that lack of fuel coming in. And then you get the rebound weight gain. And the experience that most of my clients have is that diets like Weight Watchers or any diet that restricts calories, it worked previously when you're in your 20s. But as you've got older, hormones have changed, nothing really seems to work anymore. Not even the trendy high tech options like Zoe, but also things like the fat loss injections, even those aren't working for some people. And every day I have conversations with women who have tried all these things, but they haven't. And it's because they don't address the root causes of stubborn weight. You follow the guidelines and you do what you've been taught about weight loss, but all you get is cravings and tiredness and hunger and very slow progress, perhaps even weight gain as well. And it doesn't have to be like that. There is a much, much better way. So, what I share with you is going to enable you to be able to wake up every day and actually look forward to choosing an outfit instead of dreading it, to eat in a way that feels good and optimizes your health in the long term, to be able to stop dieting for every holiday, to set the best example for your kids so that they grow up with a healthy relationship with food, and to finally feel comfortable and sexy in your own skin. So I hope you're feeling excited to learn. But there's just some pictures of me with my family and things that I do, and my dog who may well make a grumble at some point. So, some of the things that I've learned along the way is that you're not struggling with stubborn weight because you've got weak willpower, or because you haven't cleaned up your diet enough, or because you haven't cut enough calories, or because you're not doing enough exercise. The vast majority of women that come to me have been pretty disciplined and eat better than probably the vast majority of the population, and are often more active than most, but still don't see results. And if that isn't the case for you, then don't worry, this all still applies to you. But women's physiology changes after the age of 35. And there are a few big shifts that happen that change the way that we respond to food and exercise. The typical approaches, the traditional weight loss strategies, uh, they just don't work anymore. And they can actually set you up to fail because they can worsen the factors driving fat gain in women over 40. But they also tend to destroy your relationship with food, as well as your self belief and your confidence as well. And that's just something that I find so frustrating. And once we take an approach that actually aligns with your body's needs, it no longer feels like an uphill battle and everything will change. And the reality for my clients has been that focusing on optimizing their health and working with their body's unique needs, when you do that, fat loss becomes a happy side effect, so that you're not having to think about what on earth you're supposed to be eating and micromanaging your diet the whole time. And doing that is really freeing. So, if it's okay, I'd love to share a little case study that explains this in more detail. And I also think it's really helpful to see examples of what real success looks like. So this is Suzanne, and ever since her early 40s, she had struggled with finding a way of eating that she enjoyed that also helped her to achieve her weight goals. And she'd tried a few diets without much luck and found that they just weren't working despite sticking to them strictly. No weight was coming off, and she was getting really frustrated with her scales and was really starting to feel like food was the enemy and that her body was broken. She didn't really think that there would be underlying imbalances because she'd been to her doctors and they'd run some tests and she'd been told that everything was normal. So she just assumed that perhaps she just needed to try harder or find a magic formula in terms of calories, macros, that sort of thing. So we ran some tests, and here is her overview of her imbalances. So as you can see, there's kind of four areas that we assessed. So the first one is something called oxidative stress. And this is a measure of the amount of DNA damage that is happening. Raised oxidative stress markers can indicate accelerated aging, disruption to fat burning, and even an increased risk of cancers and metabolic diseases. Then we've got mitochondrial dysfunction. So, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. It's where fat burning actually happens. And it's also where energy production happens. And we're going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. But dysfunction in this area will cause poor fat burning and sluggishness. Then we've got toxic exposure, and a high toxic load can inhibit fat loss and disrupt hormones. And then lastly, we've got methylation, which is a complicated process that involves brain chemicals and hormone detoxification, fat burning, energy productions, and much more. So, an imbalance here can have a significant impact on various systems in the body. So, as you can see, Suzanne had a moderate imbalance in all of these areas. Yet, when she went to the doctors to have a test done, she was told that everything was normal and that she just needed to try harder, which is the experience that so many people have. But actually, she had multiple imbalances that were contributing to your stubborn weight and also silently causing metabolic damage in the background. And then you can also see here that Suzanne had some digestive imbalances. So she had some yeast overgrowth, specifically candida. And this is significant too. Your gut is linked to the elimination of your hormones, your nutrient absorption, inflammation, load, and much more. So it was really important that we address this too. So for Suzanne, her roadmap to lose weight and keep off, it included a personalized plan where we focused on supporting liver function, gut health, reducing inflammation. We supported her adrenals and also some mindset work too, because remember, she'd been struggling with her relationship with food, which is something that can make it more difficult to be consistent in your efforts. So we worked on those areas by changing up her diet with some lifestyle tweaks, adjustments to the exercise that she was doing. So, for example, we swapped some of the cardio she was doing for some strength training, walking, and we also used some short term supplements to support the correction of these imbalances. And then by the time we were 4 months in, Suzanne had lost 2 stone or 28 pounds, which was a big deal for her because she'd been trying to shift that weight for years without getting past losing a few pounds. And the most exciting thing is that she didn't even feel like she was on a diet. She really enjoyed her new way of eating and she wasn't missing out on the foods that she loved. And she also developed a far healthier relationship with food, which is going to set her up for that long term success as well. So let's get into it. The first thing that you really need to know is that getting into a calorie deficit does not automatically lead to weight loss. We're taught that weight loss is black and white, burn off more calories than you eat, and you'll lose weight. But this just isn't true. There's loads of factors that need to be in place in order for your body to be able to burn fat. And some certainly are better than others, but they all have the same limitation, which is that they only focus on one very small piece of the weight loss equation, which is calorie control. And it's really frustrating. Everything that you've tried was probably pretty much destined to fail. But the truth of it is that it's much easier than the restrictions or the supplements that are constantly thrown at us. It's not as simple as calories in versus calories out, but it certainly can be much easier than having to push through hunger and cravings. So there's lots of factors involved in fat burning, and one of the biggest puzzle pieces is hormones. Firstly, your blood sugar hormones control whether you're in fat burning or fat storage mode. And when blood sugars become elevated, the hormone insulin is released to help bring those blood sugars down. And it really achieves that by sweeping those sugars into your cells where they're used to either make energy or so to put that in a more simple way, we can really think about insulin as like a fat storage hormone. And when levels are raised, we can't get into fat burning, even if we're in a calorie deficit. Okay, so if your blood sugars are raised, you can't burn fat. And then essentially the opposite happens with a hormone called glucagon. This is really your fat burning hormone, and this helps us to break down our fat stores so that we can use them for energy. So you have little factories in your cells called mitochondria, and that turns food and our fat stores into energy when we need it. So, if you can imagine those factories in your cells, you can probably imagine that they need to have all of the machinery in place so that they can complete every part of the chemical reaction that burns fat. The factories also need to be fully staffed. And the staff in this analogy are vitamins and minerals, which really help to facilitate fat burning. And this is where your thyroid hormones come in. Your thyroid controls the speed of your metabolism and the speed of these factories, as well as pretty much the speed of everything else that's going on in your body. So, if you have a lack of certain nutrients, or if your thyroid is under functioning, even just a little bit, these are going to impact how fast you're fat burning. And what this means is that even if you're in fat burning mode because your blood sugars are balanced, and even if you're in a calorie deficit, you may still not be burning fat or calories as you should be. So, to give you another analogy of a car, the blood sugar hormones, insulin and glucagon, they're like the steering wheel. They determine the direction that you're going in. Is it fat burning? Is it fat storage? And the thyroid is like the accelerator and the brake. And then essentially the calories are like the fuel. It's important to be aware that thyroid problems can occur at any age, but they do become more common during perimenopause and also having children. And the experience that many women have when they're struggling with stubborn weight is they go to the doctors, they have some tests done, and then they're told that everything is normal. But there's several problems with this that I'll quickly just touch on. So the tests the doctors do are very basic. They are looking for disease and they don't tend to pick up the more subtle imbalances that many experience. And every week in the Nourish Method, we have clients who've been told that their thyroid is normal, only for us to find when we run just slightly more advanced tests that things are far from normal. And then, secondly, what's considered to be normal is very debatable. And what the thyroid experts demonstrate is that optimal thyroid function looks really quite different to normal thyroid function. And if your results do come back borderline from the doctors, they usually just wait until it gets worse before they do anything. And then lastly, I'll just mention that there's never ever any investigation into why your thyroid is under functioning. So you just get given a band aid, one treatment, whatever the cause. And while that may help your symptoms, it doesn't actually solve the underlying cause. And the thyroid imbalance is probably going to get worse over time. So, in short, if you've been told that your thyroid is normal, or if you've been prescribed medication and told that you're all good now, that may not be the whole story. And that is a big deal because optimal thyroid function is really critical for the speed of your metabolism. So, those are the big boys when it comes to controlling fat burning, insulin and thyroid. But there are some other hormones that play a big role too. Your sex hormones, particularly estrogen, can drive fat gain. Imbalances in estrogen can drive insulin resistance, which prevents fat burning. And then issues with testosterone, whether it's too high or too low, can also drive fat storage by driving insulin resistance as well, and can also drive inflammation. And then we've got the real bitch, the troublemaker that no one invited, which is cortisol. So, cortisol is your main stress hormone. It's produced in response to stress, whether that's emotional stress like bereavements or work pressure or being constantly busy, or whether it's more physical stress like lack of sleep, pain, over over exercising or under eating. So, cortisol is very disruptive to all these other hormones that we've mentioned. And chronically elevated cortisol can result in low estrogen, low thyroid, and high insulin. So, a recipe for weight gain. Now, that's not to say that cortisol is the only cause for those imbalances, but it's a big factor. So, it's all these hormones that impact fat burning. And being in a calorie deficit or eating less and exercising more does nothing to improve these imbalances and could actually make them worse. So that's why, despite feeling like you're doing everything right, you're not seeing results. And the big question is, why does this become more of a problem after 40? If you remember earlier, I said that women's physiology changes after 40. So what happens is that for women, typically around the age of 35, the levels of sex hormones begin to change and they overall decline on that approach to menopause, which is, usually very gradual, but it can be sudden if you've had a radical hysterectomy or if you're on hormone suppression treatment, or more likely to develop imbalances in your hormones as estrogen and progesterone become out of balance with each other. But what's happening is your ovaries start to wind down, hence the reduction in the sex hormone levels. And your adrenal glands, which produce your stress hormones, they take over some of the production of your sex hormones. So your adrenals go from having one job to doing the work of two. And that essentially makes you far less resilient to the impacts of stress and other things that can disrupt your sex hormones. And at the same time, the decrease in estrogen results in a loss of muscle mass. And muscle is metabolically active. The less you have, the fewer calories you burn, whether you're exercising or not. So, to put all of that in simple terms, your metabolism drops and your body becomes hypersensitive to stress. And as you learned earlier, stress is a massive inhibitor of weight loss. So, not a nice combination. So, those diets that used to work when you're in your 20s, they just don't cut it when you're in your 40s because the problem is far deeper than how many calories you're eating. So Rebecca came to me because she'd been struggling to shift the weight despite exercising 3 times a week and eating lighter. She'd even been working with a personal trainer who was pushing her pretty hard, and she was perimenopausal as well. So Rebecca's key imbalances were hormones, inflammation, and blood sugar imbalance. So here's her blood sugar assessment. Glucose and her insulin were higher than optimal, and you now know that we can't get into fat burning mode when our blood sugars are high and when insulin's high. Here's her thyroid hormones. So we spoke earlier about how your standard tests at the doctors don't pick up the more subtle imbalances. And this is a prime example. Rebecca's TSH and T4, they were normal. And those are the markers that your doctor should hopefully test. Naturally, Rebecca was told that her thyroid was normal and that she just needed to try harder. But several other thyroid markers are below optimal here. And that's enough to cause weight loss resistance, fatigue, cravings, as well as worsened perimenopausal symptoms as well. And then let's look at her inflammatory markers. So these markers can really inhibit weight loss and be disruptive to hormones. Her doctor told her that everything was normal and she was eating quote unquote healthy foods and exercising more than most. And she was trying to stay in that calorie deficit. But as we now know, that isn't going to address these imbalances no matter how hard she worked. And not only that, but that calorie deficit was really telling her brain that there was a famine, a lack of food available, which is the famine response. And that made her body down regulate fat burning. So, again, a recipe for stubborn weight. So, next, let's get on to talking more about hormones and how they work. Ever since weight management has been a thing, we've been told that it's greed and it's laziness that drives weight gain. But thankfully, in recent years, that perspective is beginning to very slowly shift. And there is a much better understanding out there that there is more to it, although that message hasn't reached every health professional, unfortunately. But what we now see constantly online from coaches and nutritionists and supplement companies is that it's your hormones to blame. And I've, of course, just spent 10 minutes or so explaining exactly how hormones are linked to your weight management. However, imbalanced hormones are still just a symptom. Hormones do control fat burning and fat storage, but we still need to look at the bigger picture and take steps to uncover the cause of those hormonal imbalances. And while the menopause transition is a very normal and natural process, the stubborn weight and the chaotic symptoms that come with it are not necessarily a natural part of that. And it is the dysregulation in the body that makes this menopause transition a difficult one. We can't make hormones the scapegoat for stubborn weight because that implies that gaining weight is just part and parcel of menopause. I can tell you from working with hundreds, probably close to 1,000 women now, that most definitely not. So, I want to give you another mini science lesson so that you can understand how hormones actually work. Because when you understand this, you can understand what we need to do to support hormone balance so that you can release that stubborn weight. Your body has to make your hormones, and they then need to be free to work properly in your body. And then we have to eliminate them from the body in an efficient way. Okay. So for this first step to make hormones, we need to be digesting and absorbing our food properly, as well as including a wide range of nutrients in the diet. And then for your hormones to function properly in the body, we need nutrients to facilitate things like vitamins and minerals. We can think of them as like factory workers that connect production lines. And then we need to also avoid the hormone disruptors that can prevent hormones from getting to where they need to go. So things like toxins and inflammation and stress, infections, intolerances, deficiencies. These can all disrupt the function of our hormones. And then once the hormones have done their job, we need to detoxify them via the liver. And these liver pathways need to be clear and running efficiently. So if you think of it as like a bath that isn't draining properly, all the bits in the bath keep going round and round while they're waiting to get down the plug hole. The same thing happens in your body if your liver pathways aren't draining properly. Your hormones and the toxins will keep circulating around and around your system, causing disruption and damage. And then once those hormones are finally detoxed, they need to be eliminated via the bile to your digestive tract. So if your bile is thick and sludgy, or if there's blockages in the biliary tree, then this is going to impact the clearance of those hormones. And then lastly, once they've been carried into your digestive system, you need to have healthy balance of gut bacteria and be having regular bowel movements to prevent the reabsorption of those hormones. And what that means is that there is a lot that we can do to influence the balance of our hormones by ensuring that your gut and your liver are working well, by managing inflammation in the body, analyzing our nutrient levels, and managing stress. So I really want you to understand this. Your diet and your lifestyle and your internal chemistry of your body has a great impact on your hormone balance. And I want you to know that because I know many of you may have been told that there's nothing that you can do to lose weight now that you're perimenopausal or menopausal or postmenopause. Or maybe if you have other things going on like PCOS or endometriosis, fibroids, supporting your hormones so that you can lose fat without a ridiculous regime is absolutely achievable. And the type of food you eat, the habits you implement will impact your gut health, inflammation, nutrients, and liver function. And that will impact your hormones and whether you're in fat burning or fat storage. So it's not calories or hormones keeping you stuck. Hopefully that makes sense. So here's another little case study. This is Julia's story. So she's someone who, again, had always really kept herself fit and tried to eat well. She didn't drink too much. She walked the dog every day. She did a few exercise classes each week. And that worked well for her until really the age of 43. And when she started gaining weight, she hadn't really changed anything. It just started going on. And obviously, she was quite confused and concerned because she felt like she was doing everything right. And she also had noticed how her mother, her late grandmother, and her aunts had all become obese and developed diabetes and experienced various cancers as they got older, and all seemed to start going downhill for them around that time of menopause. And that's one of the reasons why Julia had always made an effort to keep herself fit and well. So it was pretty distressing for her when she seemed to be heading in the same direction despite her best efforts. So she went to the doctors. They weren't really interested despite her family history. And they said it was probably perimenopause and they advised her to go on HRT. But this didn't feel like the best step for Julia. She wanted to take a more natural approach and then come back to HRT as more of a last resort. And partly also because her mum and her aunts had all taken HRT as well, and they'd still bloomed. So that's why she reached out to me and joined the Nourish Method. So we ran some tests to explore what was going on. And boy, there was a lot going on. She scored 8 out of 10 and big red circles indicating significant imbalances and a high need for support in those areas that I explained earlier. She also had a greatly increased need for almost all of the nutrients we assessed. And as you can see from the picture on the right, she wasn't absorbing her nutrients efficiently. She had an overgrowth of bacteria and yeast in her gut. And eating less and exercising more, it wouldn't have resolved these. Taking HRT wouldn't have resolved these. I'm not against HRT, by the way, not at all, but it just needs to be used appropriately, not just as something that's prescribed to women when we don't know what else to do because we haven't done any investigation into what's going on. So, when we have multiple areas of imbalance, which we see very often, we have to be quite strategic so that we're working with your physiology. So we started getting the foundations in place, which involved getting protein into her breakfast, increasing her fiber intake, and also making sure she had lots of beneficial fats in her diet, like omega 3s and avocado and that sort of thing. And also making sure she was properly hydrated and chewing her food properly. So, very basic and boring stuff, but very important and very impactful. Absolutely cannot be skipped. And then we started with optimizing her gut health. So, supporting the production of her digestive enzymes and stomach acid, and using herbal antimicrobials to address the overgrowth of bacteria and repopulating the gut with beneficial bacteria as well, and reducing inflammation so that we could then focus on correcting deficiencies and reducing the toxic load and improving detoxification. So, doing all of this supports the balance of her hormones. It prevents the damage to mitochondria so that her metabolism could repair and so that she could start burning fat again efficiently. And this all might sound complicated, it is, but complex problems don't have to have complex solutions. I find for most people, 80% of it is getting the foundations in place. But as a result, Julia lost 1.5 stone. She felt much more energized and much better digestion wise. And she said it was a relief to also just feel heard and not feel fobbed off. And she also talked a lot about how her appearance now matched the efforts that she was putting in. And that's something that I hear a lot from people. They feel really upset when the effort and the work they're putting in to look after themselves just doesn't match what's happening on the scales or what they're seeing in the mirror. People think that they're lying about what they eat and what they do, which is obviously very upsetting. So, lastly, One of the case studies I spoke about, one of my clients was looking for a magic formula, and it can often feel like that's what we're missing. We need that. We need that magical balance of macros. We need the right calorie balance, the right meal plan, the right supplements, the right fasting schedule. And I'm guessing as you'll hear, that stuff probably hasn't worked for you. So hopefully you're starting to understand why. What is greatly overlooked in the weight loss industry is the non-food factors that impact your weight. You could have an incredibly clean diet. You could be in a consistent calorie deficit, but if you're not sleeping properly, if you're chronically stressed, if your toxic load is high, there's underlying infections or imbalances that are unresolved, you're not going to be seeing weight loss, or certainly not weight loss that lasts. If you want to lose weight and keep it off, as well as optimize your energy and your well being in the process, we need to approach a weight loss strategy holistically. And we can't be one dimensional and just focus on food and exercise. Your typical diets can have that opposite effect and actually cause weight gain when you're in your 40s and beyond. So I want to just explain that a little bit more. So let's think about some of the typical strategies. We've spoken about the problem with this is that it's not going deep enough to support your hormones. And that is going to drive metabolic down regulation. When you're in a calorie deficit consistently, your body adapts to the lack of fuel coming in. And research shows that if you eat less than usual, your body actually expends less energy on other bodily processes in order to conserve energy so that you don't starve. And one of the areas that gets hit hard is your hormone production, especially your thyroid function. And then next we have approach like low carb and keto and fasting. And the problem with these approaches can be that often it's just calorie control in disguise. They really have the same limitation, but also your body is having to function on very few carbs. And eating low carb or doing extended fasts can seem like a good option when you think about how your blood sugars need to be balanced to burn fat. And it's easy to assume that when you remove all the carbs and the sugars, you're going to turn into a fat burning machine. But it doesn't really work like that in practice because if you remember from the beginning, there are lots of factors involved in fat burning. And don't get me wrong, keto or very low carb can work amazing, particularly for younger women and for men of any age. But usually that's in the short term. For women who are in their 40s and 50s, it can actually drive thyroid problems. It can further hormone disruption. It can cause gut imbalances because of the lack of fiber. And this is even more so when there's not a good foundation in place. And I've worked with many women who did keto and it worked really great, but then the weight piled back on and they just really could not get it off afterwards. And then we've got the eat less and exercise more approach, which is particularly detrimental because when we work out, we build stronger muscles by damaging them and then they repair themselves and they get stronger. But the problem is your muscles need fuel and they need nutrients in order to do that repair. If you're following a restrictive diet, your body isn't going to have the fuel it needs to that's going to result in less lean muscle in your body, which is a big problem because your muscle is metabolically active. It burns calories all the time, even when you're not exercising. You already begin to lose muscle after the age of 35 because of that decline in estrogen. So that the eat less, exercise more approach will often further that muscle loss, setting you up for stubborn fat. And if you add into the mix high stress and lack of sleep, then you've got a recipe for metabolic damage. So this in a nutshell is why focusing on food and exercise alone is probably going to set you up to fail. And you might do some really positive things. That supplement you're taking might be great. The protein powder you're using might be good quality. The workouts you're doing might be fabulous. But these things are not really strategies. They're more tools that they're like bonuses. They're doing a little bit of this, they're doing a little bit of that, but it isn't going to achieve any results of note, which is really why I wanted to put together this training for you to show you that bigger picture. So, if you're watching this, you probably want to feel amazing when you look in the mirror without having to give up your favorite foods. You probably want a simpler way to achieve your happy weight without having to give up your social life. You probably want to stop feeling frustrated and hungry and deprived and like food is the enemy. And you want to discover a way of eating healthy and your zest for life. And so that you can really shift the stubborn weight so that you can feel confident and sexy and happy. And I, of course, made you a really big promise at the beginning of this training to show you the simplest way to do that. So, next, you've got a choice really. You can continue doing what you're doing using these kind of surface level strategies that haven't really been working, or we can choose a simpler path and really do that deeper work to rescue your metabolism and use something like the Nourish Method, which comes with a proven system and accountability so that you can get to your goals. And throughout this webinar, you've heard me mention the Nourish Method, and this is how I can help you to achieve lasting weight loss. If it's okay, I could take a couple of minutes just to share like how I can best help people directly. Is that all right?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So, the best way that I can help each person directly is with a weight loss breakthrough call. So we have time allocated in our schedule so that we could speak with you personally about how we can support you to apply what we've spoken about today so that you can start seeing real results within the next few months. My team are experts in addressing weight loss resistance in women over 40 who really want to repair their metabolisms so that they can shift the weight without the deprivation, the hunger, the cravings, and just generally feeling miserable. And we really transform our clients' lives. The best thing to do is to book a call with us. So once we're on the call, we'll get you clarity on what you need to start seeing results. We'll get clearer on your goals and why you want it. We'll figure out if you have any obstacles or challenges that could get in the way of your success and how we might work around that, how to handle things like social situations or pressure, and any self sabotage that might be happening as well. And this way, by the time the call's over, you're going to have really good clarity and some helpful strategies that propel your success. The call is free, by the way, and it's all about us helping you to figure out what your roadmap to success looks like and how we can help you to get from where you are now. It's my mission in life to really transform women's lives and optimize their health so that they can get to their happy, healthy bodies in a way where food is a really joyful thing. And I can know that we can help some of you to overcome the barriers that have been stopping you from shifting that weight without the rebound weight gain. And I know there are probably many of you listening that do want to do that deeper work, do the stuff that goes deeper than those typical surface level fixes, and also take a more personalized approach. So if you are someone that knows in order to succeed, you need that, then great, we can discuss the next steps and if you are a good fit for the Nourish Method on the call. And if not, that's completely okay. There is just one catch, which is that if you are looking for a quick fix or a magic pill where you don't really care if what you're doing is supporting your health or your hormones or your mind or your body, then the call isn't for you. It's also not for you if you are not ready to take personal responsibility for your success, if you're not patient with yourself, if you're not committed to making your health a priority, and you're not open minded to a new way of doing things. So that's pretty much everything I can tell about the call. I am very confident that if you follow the steps and if you put in the work, then you can get to your goals with the right approach. So, yeah, if that sounds good to you, then make sure you go ahead and schedule your call. One other thing is that I also have a free download for your listeners, which is something that I call the 6 simple rules. And they're just some very simple steps that will help you to get a foundation in place. And it's essentially a framework that you can use to help you to get into fat burning mode wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever food you've got available, more about like how you're eating and how you make your food selections.
This was really helpful. And the way that you broke down such a complex, there's nothing simple about metabolism or fat loss or weight loss and the analogies that you used were really helpful.
I'm glad.
I might steal some of those. It's that prevalent, like you said, idea that if you just eat less and move more, that is hugely problematic. And it was disproven like decades ago. So why that message is out there, but there's something about it that always resonates. Like, it's my fault. I'm just not disciplined enough. I don't want it enough. And it sends out that message that you just don't care. And that I think the mindset issues that go along with that are so powerful that we continue to buy into it, despite the fact that it's been disproven for so long.
Yeah, definitely. If you feel like your waistband's getting a little bit tight, we automatically start thinking, oh, maybe I'll just skip breakfast, or maybe I'll just have a few shakes instead of a proper meal. And, I do it as well. Or at least I think that. And I stop myself and like, no, I know that isn't how the body works. So it's just something that's really conditioned into us from a really young age. Most people have probably grown up with seeing their mums constantly worried about their weight, dieting, trying to manage their food and taking some way. So it makes sense why we would all have this kind of twisted relationship with food.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have the show The Biggest Loser in the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that one, and you see the weight loss, and you're like, oh, it's because they're committed. But what they don't tell you is that 1 year later, all of the contestants, every single contestant, not only gained all their weight back, but some of them even gained more weight. And it had
Mm,
to do with exactly what you were talking about, is that the metabolism had dropped so low. Their calorie, like they were literally eating like 500 calories a day and gaining weight, and they couldn't sustain it. And that's what
mm.
happens with diets when you drop your metabolism. And it is so hard to get that metabolism to come back up.
The Biggest Loser is a good example. It's an extreme example. It contains elements of the things that everyone goes through, from the restriction and the need for massive willpower and discipline that they're only able to sustain because they're on a TV show with coaches shouting at them. But also, it must have just horribly messed up their relationship with food and really demonized a lot of foods, which is another big reason why all of that weight went back on and more.
Yeah. But it's that underlying message of you just don't want it enough. If you wanted enough, you'd spend 8 hours a day and talking to psychologists and exercising and eating, I don't know, grass for every meal. And it's so harmful to the body. So I love that you talked about all of this. Yeah, and also with going to the doctor, I love that you showed the different markers that aren't routinely checked. They
Mhm.
check just these simple things. And what's really frustrating as well is that when you go and you ask your doctor or provider about weight loss and you come back in and they just assume that you're non-compliant or exaggerating about how hard you've been trying, and you feel it right in your chart. I've seen them write it in the chart. Oh, the patient's non-compliant. And you're like, really?
Yeah, it's really upsetting. And so many women that I've worked with have been to diet clubs where they have their weekly weigh in and they've tried really hard. They've made sure that they've eaten the sins or the points that are under. They've been exercising and they don't lose any weight or they gain weight. And then someone else who's had quote unquote a bad week loses half a stone or something, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And all they're told is, oh, just try a bit harder next week. And there's no real investigation as to why they're having those issues.
Yeah, so I love your program, and we will definitely get your download just so people can download that and schedule a call that will be on your speaker page. So anybody watching this can go to Louise's speaker page, or it's in the playbook as well. You'll be able to use the QR code to schedule your appointment with her or download the metabolism guide. So, Louise, thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.